Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first event this year, MCC Brussels, first event. This is particularly important, certainly important for me, because in many ways, when we're talking about the Cordon Sanitaire, what we're talking about is a development that's been in place for 2 decades, 3 decades here in Europe. And it's been used as a way of silencing political opposition here in Brussels. The Cordon Sanitaire was designed to prevent the voices of certain movements from being heard, to prevent them from having access to the media or to official positions within Parliament and other institutions. You know, a long time before you heard the expression cancel culture was already institutionalized in the form of the Cordon Sanitaire. That's really what it's really all about. It basically means that you don't even have to cancel people anymore, because as far as you're concerned, those people have got no right to a voice. And what's even worse, and this is why I feel very strongly about this subject, is that the very expression cordon sanitaire, just think about it, cordon sanitaire, essentially medicalizes politics. What the cordon sanitaire does and says is that people that belong to certain political parties, like Vlaams Belang, for example, are essentially sick people who are contagious, people that are toxic. And the only way you deal with movements like that is by isolating them the way you would do people who have disease under COVID or anything else. And to me, this institutionalization of the medicalization of politics, of turning politics into a public health matter almost, really indicates and highlights the strong, powerful, anti-democratic impulse that is behind it. I think the good news is that very soon the cordon sanitaire will come to an end. You cannot simply keep people's voices from being heard. And I hope that the speakers tonight will have an opportunity to explain, to go deeply into the subject, and explain to all of us that what's at issue isn't just some small procedural matter to do with Parliament, but what's really at issue is fundamentally an attack on representative democracy itself. So please welcome our speakers and our chair, Agnieszka.
Thank you, Frank. Now, thank you, Frank, for a wonderful introduction. From my side, I would like to welcome everyone warmly to our first event of the year. I would like to ask everyone at the back to please come and find your seats. There are still seats across the room, and it will help us when more guests arrive. It was a very popular event, and we are delighted that all of us really care about democracy and letting people be heard and taking part in the democratic process. And this is the proof for that all of you came here on Wednesday evening, despite of the weather in Brussels, I have to say. Now, I would like to introduce our speakers. The first one speaking would be Jacob Reynolds, Head of Policy at MCC Brussels. Afterwards, it would be Elisabeth Deringer, MEP, Freedom Party of Austria, Patriots for Europe. Thank you for being with us. And the third guest, Tom van den Driesche, MEP, Vlaams Belang, Patriots for Europe. Now, I would like to just remind our speakers that it would be 7 to 10 minutes each, and I will try to be quite firm. And I think I'm already known around here for being firm, because we want the audience to take part, to ask questions, to say short comments, to be part of the conversation, because I think this will shape our future, us taking active part in the democratic process. So thank you very much for coming. Listen carefully, prepare your questions and comments, and later on there would be 2 roving mics coming out to you, and I will try to give you an opportunity to take your part in the meeting. Thank you.
Right, hello. Yeah, welcome. Thanks everyone for coming. As we see from the tumultuous events in Germany just today, it's pretty clear that Europe stands on the verge of a major disruption, and the Cordon Sanitaire, which is the systematic attempt by elites across Europe to sanitize democracy of everything that contradicts the values of the EU elite, this is beginning to crumble. But the last stand, if you like, I think, there'll be a last push to shore up the cordon, and we should be worried in a bit because that will be perhaps as kind of brutal and damaging as anything that's gone before. Because for the elites across Europe, there is so much on the line. The fundamental questions facing Europe can no longer be ignored, and the threat to this elite of a radical new set of answers to these questions is so great that they have, as it were, our elites kind of have their backs to the wall, and they are like a little like cornered wild animals, perhaps most dangerous when they have their backs to the wall. And so in this short speech, I want to give a little sense of where the Cordon Sanitaire came from, why it cannot hold, as our title has it, and what can we expect if it begins to, as we hope it does, break down. So the Cordon Sanitaire represents, as Frank said, maybe he read my speech, but he said that it's an attempt to isolate European decision makers from popular oversight. And it's been decided by this group of people, certainly not by you and me, we didn't decide it, that certain views and certain parties are so dangerous that they have to be systematically excluded from European public life. And we all know the kind of key core issues on which the contemporary morality police insist that there can be no deviation. The most important is, of course, migration. And this one's especially important because up until now, elites have been relatively successful in drawing a straight line from questions about migration to fascism. And it's allowed them to, our elites has allowed them to LARP as kind of anti-fascists from a previous era and provided the whole kind of impetus of the Cordon Sanitaire with almost the kind of facsimile of a countercultural energy. They would like to pretend that the Cordon Sanitaire protects people from dangerous anti-democratic leaders, but as we know, it's quite the opposite. The Cordon Sanitaire protects dangerous anti-democratic leaders from ordinary people. But the issue is broader than just with migration, because the Cordon Sanitaire applies to every position which contradicts the mainstream EU position. So to seriously question EU integration, to seriously question destructive environmental policies, or to seriously question the cultural agenda of EU elites. All this invokes the cordon. And I think it's important to grasp this in its totality because it shows that what this isn't just a debate about policies. This is a confrontation with a system and the system of elites that sustain it. So advocates of the Cordon Sanitaire are so insistent and often so desperate because what they seek to protect is not just a policy position or a particular answer, but as it were, the whole edifice of the contemporary liberal order. And I think here we have to have a bit of honesty because those on the centre-right who often or sometimes make noises about reducing migration or doing something about environmental policies or improving competitiveness, those people are generally speaking not our allies in dismantling the Cordon Sanitaire. In fact, they're often the most kind of vociferous advocates of the cordon. And one recurring feature of the Cordon Sanitaire is that in the last analysis, these centre-right parties always believe they have more in common with parties of the left or the centre-left than they do with ordinary people like you and me. And so the Cordon Sanitaire, as I've said, comes from this belief that certain positions are too important to the current system. They're kind of key planks of the current order, and that's why they can't be challenged. And elites of all stripes, from the left to the centre-right, they will cling together because they and their interests lie in the continuation of this system. Now, thankfully, the Cordon Sanitaire cannot hold, and it can't hold because it's basically built on a contradiction. Its advocates claim that they're upholding democracy, but it's the results of democratic elections time and again that demonstrate that their views don't command popular support. And only our elites are kind of so stupid to fool themselves that by ignoring or overturning the results of elections that they're defending democracy. And so the Cordon Sanitaire can't hold because people across Europe have simply had enough of being ignored, and they vote with increasing insistence for parties that promise to take their concerns seriously. We've seen what's happening in Germany, but also in France in the recent parliamentary elections. We see that this kind of anti-Cordon Sanitaire is sizable and coherent enough that it poses an existential danger to the governing elites. And in France, the attempt to enforce the Cordon Sanitaire at the last election, although nominally successful, ultimately set about a series of processes that many people think has called into question the entire republic. But aside from kind of the electoral maths, there's a kind of deeper underlying issue that I think is just as important, and that's that the Cordon Sanitaire and its advocates are ideologically exhausted. It's clear that those people who try to enforce the cordon have no answer to the big questions facing Europe. So at worst, they just kind of double down on failed ideas of the past, like Draghi's idea that the solution to our economic problems is more EU integration. Or in the middle, they kind of rebrand failed ideas to sound a little bit better, like the clean industrial deal. But even at their so-called best, they just provide watered-down versions of ideas stolen from parties outside the cordon, like if they promise again and again to finally get tough with migration. And we've seen this in the reaction to Trump, that EU elites have almost lost their nerve. They go begging, seeking special protections, or trying to bribe their way out of their problems. I said at the beginning that we can expect a kind of bumpy ride as this carries on, and I think that we can expect our elites to put up one or maybe two kind of last stands. And we've seen this already in the determination that EU elites have shown to control what can and cannot be said. The very first act of the Commission after Trump's inauguration was to announce a whole raft of measures to shore up the DSA and enforce further censorship. They've even come up with a digital version of the Cordon Sanitaire, which they call the Democracy Shield. And this is just the beginning, right? We saw how the DSA was used as part of the rhetorical cover for the cancelling of Romania's election. And we saw the deployment of 250-odd kind of democratic, digital experts to monitor the discussion between Alice Weidel and Elon Musk. And Thierry Breton has promised to pull the same tricks they pulled in Romania should Germany dare to vote the wrong way. And so I have no doubt that the democratic and populist moment in European politics is going to increasingly break down the Cordon Sanitaire, but we have to be ready at the same time for a very serious fight, because they won't let go without one. And here, if I come back to the point I made about this being a confrontation with the whole system, I think those of us in the room who consider ourselves, as much as we consider ourselves populists or nationalists or patriots, we also have to be prepared to confront what is a Europe-wide system. And so this pan-European Cordon Sanitaire requires something of a pan-European response. And so we have to grasp the nettle. We have to dismantle the DSA. We have to overturn the Green Deal in its entirety, not just fiddling around the edges. And we have to take serious action to put on the bonfire the EU's NGO industrial complex. As I say, what we're facing here is a confrontation with an entire system of elites and system of ideas. The Cordon Sanitaire, right, cannot hold, but we have to be prepared for a very serious fight to give it the last blow. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The 1984 Ministry of Truth let us know division is cohesion, defamation is substantive debate, and the firewall, or I call it in my mother language, die Brandmauer, der Sperrgürtel, protects democracy. What this democracy looks like is becoming increasingly clear. Unpleasant elections are or should be cancelled. Clear election winners are not given the task of forming a government. In Austria, we had this as a good example. Opposition members are persecuted across the board. For example, through debanking. Practically all major social media platforms have been or are being pressured into pro-government censorship, and much more. The question arises as to which side of the so-called firewall the enemies of democracy are really on. Democracy essentially thrives in dialogue, the willingness to understand the positions and needs of other stakeholders, and the ability to form compromises on this basis. And unlike the omnipotence fantasies of Commission President Ursula von der Leyen or some European governments, democracy is not the dictatorship of the majority over the minority. Democracy protects the minority from the majority and even endows it with special rights of participation to ensure that this character of exchange and compromise is also reflected in parliamentary practice. Not all key positions, such as committee chairs or rapporteurs' posts, are allocated to the majority, but are usually allocated to the various parliamentary forces according to their share of the vote. The vote is in the middle of all our thoughts. However, all of these and more basic democratic principles are being undermined by the so-called firewall, sometimes more, sometimes less. We have now these problems in the legislative period. Although the Patriots for Europe are the third largest parliamentary group, we have still been denied a parliamentary vice president and various functions in the committees. The ESN group is in a similar situation. The voters of these parties are thus de facto not the one represented with their full right that they should have. The tendency of other political groups to vote against motions from the PFE or ESN groups as a matter of principle, as a part of the firewall, as well as the general refusal to engage in dialogue with these two groups. So it's various spectrum of examples I could give, but I would like to focus on the opportunities for citizens to participate so that they can participate because they vote. The firewall has an extremely negative impact on both. We have the respect from our voters, but not here in the European Parliament. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz also let his audience at the World Economic Forum in Davos know in no uncertain terms: we have freedom of speech in Europe, but not for those who support extreme right-wing positions. But who actually says what is far right? Do you find it questionable when drag queens give readings in kindergartens or early childhood? Then you are far right. Do you doubt that millions of immigrants from the Islamic world make our society a better place to live? You are far right. Are you worried about your and your children's future in view of the Green Deal policy? Also, right-wing extremist. In other words, this is fighting term refers to anyone who does not want to follow the left-green agenda or the Great Transformation. And that shows very clearly that the stigmatization as a right-wing extremist is not a term filled with content, but an instrument of power. And it's in this context that the firewall must also be seen, which is only demanded and applied where it serves to maintain the power of the left-green party cartel and its supposedly bourgeois stirrup holders. Now there is an interesting phenomenon in the relation to language regimes. Left wings constantly have to come up with new terms with which they can talk about their reality. This is because the public quickly realizes what is actually behind the terms and narratives. Also the narratives, there are a lot of examples. You know, they always talk about people coming to us with the best background, and they are all like the best researchers and they know everything. But when you say that it's not like this, you are a right-wing extremist. And in Austria, we can see that people have become resistant to these constant accusations. More and more people are simply seeing through this game of stigmatization, defamation, and exclusion. I'm therefore quite sure that citizens will also recognize the firewall or what it really is, and the undemocratic instrument of power that is intended to divide the society into black and white, or good and evil. In other words, precisely the simplistic world view of the left, which is in the end leads to mathematical certainty, to poverty or lack of freedom, usually both. So let us see the dilemma that we are in at the moment, and we can see it. More and more voters will switch to authentic patriotic parties. Sooner or later, the moderate conservative parties will be worn down by the firewall itself. And now coming also maybe to my home country, to Austria, the FPÖ became the strongest party in the last national council elections, with just under 29%. Contrary to the democratic custom of commissioning the strongest party to form a government, the federal president commissioned the election loser, the ÖVP, to form an anti-Herbert Kickl coalition. But it didn't work. So now we are in a very, very interesting moment now in Austria, and we will see what will happen in the next time in Germany. We are all looking to Germany, what will happen there. We are looking to other countries, best practice. So let's talk about Hungary, let's talk also about Italy. They were all talking about what will happen if the right will be at the top of the elections in Italy. Everybody is still going to Italy, is still eating Italian food, whatever, nothing, not at all what they were afraid of. So I can say that the firewall is harmful and it's undemocratic, it divides society, and who wants this in the end? So we have to be strong, to have an opinion, to stay not only here in front of you, but also in the European Parliament. And we we have to become masters once again of our own house, and better today than tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, as Belgium is like a miniature version of the European Union, and my party, Vlaams Belang, has been a victim of the Cordon Sanitaire since 1988. I was 10 years back then. I will dig deeper into the case of the Belgian Cordon Sanitaire against the Vlaams Belang. First of all, you must understand the broader political context in Belgium. There are 62% Flemish, there are 38% French-speaking. The Flemish account for 70% of all taxes being paid, 80% of all exports, but yet we only have 50% of political power here in Belgium. This is how the Belgian political system works. Why this is important to understand? Because my party is older than 1988. Before, we did not have any Cordon Sanitaire against my party or against any other Flemish patriotic party. When did the Cordon Sanitaire got established? It was in 1988 in the local elections in the city of Antwerp, where my party, Vlaams Belang, first reached to about 20% share of the vote. And then the Green, accompanied by some left-wing academics, they declared that there must be formed a Cordon Sanitaire against the Vlaams Belang. And the aim of this Cordon Sanitaire was to keep us out of power, because this was, of course, much too dangerous for people to have suddenly other kind of policies after elections. Now, why is this so emblematic? Because how can one define the politics of a whole country by local elections in one city? Although in Antwerp they think it's the New York of Flanders, but that's another discussion. But this is so emblematic because it illustrates that the Belgian political system is so imbalanced that even the slightest revolt by voters must be pushed down, must be tackled with political mechanisms which voters do not support. So the aim was to exclude the Vlaams Belang from entering into power. So this is one aim, but the second and most important is to convince people that voting Vlaams Belang is completely useless. So they should return over time to the traditional parties on the center-left and the center-right, where they always voted for. When Guy Verhofstadt came into power in 1999, and he formed the most left-wing government we ever had, then he stated that the success of his government, and I am quoting now, the success of my government will be determined by the result of the Vlaams Blok, the predecessor of the Vlaams Belang Party. Now, ever since 1988, we won elections in 1989 for the European elections, in 1991 for the federal elections, in 1994 again for the European elections, 1995 for the Flemish Parliament elections, 1999, and so on and so on. Election after elections, more and more voters were coming to the Vlaams Belang Party because we have another set of solutions to problems that those in power created on mass migration, on criminality, on fiscalism, and so on. Now, after this government by Guy Verhofstadt at the beginning of the 2000s, well, he himself declared that the result of his government will be defined by the result of the Vlaams Belang Party. We never had more votes than back then. We had a 24% share of the vote. Over 1 million Flemish voters revolted against his lunatic policies. And the solution for the Belgian political system was to abolish the Vlaams Belang, simply like that. You must understand that here in Belgium, judges are politically appointed. So they chose 3 judges, 3 French-speaking judges, by the way, who are also member of secret societies. It's Masonic societies. And in over 5 days, and as a student I attended this process, over 5 days, they only needed 5 days to come to a conviction and to abolish the Vlaams Belang Party as a whole. Set aside this political Cordon Sanitaire, which is rooted in a struggle of the Flemish people against a political and oppressive political Belgium system. It's not only limited to the political Cordon Sanitaire, we also have a media Cordon Sanitaire, which is even more odd than a political Cordon Sanitaire, because they determined for themselves that they are the gatekeepers of the truth, the guardians of democracy, and therefore Vlaams Belang could not be allowed to speak freely on television, or to express himself in interviews in newspapers, or to have an article written in a newspaper with our point of view. This was all not possible in our kind of democracy we have here in Belgium. It is also not possible for Vlaams Belang to advertise in no matter what newspaper or magazine. The last number on the representation of Vlaams Belang in speaking time from the official Flemish agency who investigates these kind of things is 1% speaking time on public television, no, 1.5%, sorry, must not exaggerate. 1.5% speaking time on public television and 1% on private television. So while we are, not only in 2004, but yet again we have over 1 million voters are we representing. And what's even more important in this regard is that there's a lot of media concentration. So there are basically 2 concerns. There's one private or 2 private and 1 public. And they divide the media market amongst them. And the public television, at the beginning of the 2000s, they were so arrogant to openly state in a written declaration what their attitude towards the Vlaams Belang Party would be. And they defined themselves as being activists, being paid to tackle the Vlaams Belang Party and protect democracy. Now, these are things you could imagine in communist systems, but yet here in the heart of Europe in Brussels, with all these European values being promoted, we have a system, media being organized and subsidized. Private media get subsidized with tens of millions of euros per year. And what do they need to do? They need to tackle the Vlaams Belang Party and protect democracy. And added to that, to the political and the media Cordon Sanitaire, is also this social Cordon Sanitaire. And it's not only about stigmatizing people who are candidates for Vlaams Belang, for example, but the trade unions expel members who are a candidate for Vlaams Belang. Even last week, in my hometown of Bruges, somebody was expelled. An ordinary worker who doesn't have any academic degrees, he's not a rich man, he stands up for what he believes in. Well, the trade union is a system, is a structure to keep those people down. Be silent. Don't use your political rights or something will happen to you. You will not be longer protected in your social rights in your company. Now, what is the result of this Cordon Sanitaire, this threefold Cordon Sanitaire being pushed upon us since 1988? I think, first of all, there's a complete denial of the reality by the establishment. The Cordon Sanitaire, and this is very important, is top-down imposed. It is not a grassroots action or something like that. Of course, there are subsidized NGOs being active in telling us what to do, but it is top-down imposed. Because the majority of people in Flanders, overwhelmingly, are against this Cordon Sanitaire. Even on the left, even the Green voters have a very slim majority in favor of the Cordon Sanitaire. This does not mean that they are for the Vlaams Belang, or they are promoting Vlaams Belang ideas, but they yet want to have the choice, and they think that this Cordon Sanitaire is anti-democratic, and they are rightly to do so. There was no electoral defeat of the Vlaams Belang due to this Cordon Sanitaire. We only won elections, and the only time when we start losing elections again, it's a normal dynamic in the history of political parties. And then we rejuvenated with our president, Tom van Rieke, since 2014. And now we are again at 23-24% of the vote. So we're the number one force or the second in the Flemish political landscape. We also did not have any political defeat. And why am I saying this? Because the basic political agenda is not being defined by those who are in power, but is being defined by the Vlaams Belang. Everything the Vlaams Belang has addressed for years is top priority amongst the Flemish people on migration. Number one priority. By the way, in the last elections, I need to run? Okay. In the last elections, the media did not want to talk about the migration problem. It's also about manipulating democracy. Basically, if you think about it, we have a proportionate system. The Cordon Sanitaire is introducing a majoritarian logic in a proportionate electoral system. So people are not voting for or against the Cordon Sanitaire. They are voting for or against some parties. So they are not expressing themselves. There's no democratic legitimacy. And I think that there's a fundamental fragility in the system because the dam is bursting. Vlaams Belang, after all these years, has finally broken the Cordon Sanitaire in 3 local communities, 4, 1 by an absolute majority, and 3 by making a coalition agreement with Christian Democrats and liberals and even socialists. It's not the conservative NVA who is breaking this Cordon Sanitaire because it keeps the NVA in power, what has also been mentioned. I will add 1 more minute because I think it's important. What is the way forward out of this? I think tactically, nationalist or conservative or populist forces must keep on building coalitions. We are not a fringe group in society. We represent the will of the people and the fundamental interests of the people. So we must just continue drilling holes in this dam. And a dam will collapse only after 1 hole is being drilled in it. And this is exactly what has happened now. And all of these local NVA, so-called conservative chapters, are now demanding to their party president, how come we need to make coalitions with the socialists we don't like? How come we need to make coalitions with the Christian Democrats who have no principle whatsoever? And so on and so on. So the center-right must pay the price for this Cordon Sanitaire. And this is also my position in the European Parliament, and maybe also the one of the Patriots group as a whole. We cannot convince the Social Democrats or the Liberals to abolish the Cordon Sanitaire. We can convince some EPP members to abandon this Cordon Sanitaire procedure. And how can we do this? By letting them pay the price for it, for having it imposed on us. We already don't have any seats in committees, but maybe by voting socialists and liberals and even communists in, I don't care, then the EPP group will lose their seats, will lose their power. This is the way how they will realize that the Cordon Sanitaire basically is not against the bad guys in parliament, but is aimed against the normal right-wing majority of common sense. And strategically, I think we must continue on our path on normalization. What we are advocating may be a radical message, given the radical context all of those parties in power have created, but we need to continue this normalization. And to sum it up, I have started in 1988 with my speech. I was a young boy back then, but I still remember the tearing down of the Berlin Wall. And some weeks, 4 to 5 weeks before the wall came down, they were celebrating 40 years of German Democratic Republic. There were tens of thousands of people in the streets, young people waving the red flags. And yet, several weeks, the wall came down and the whole system collapses. Because basically, nobody believes their crap. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. I will only forgive you because you tried to raise people up and give them solutions instead of just complaining. So I let you off the hook. So please get ready with your questions and comments. Just to kick us off, Jacob, you mentioned that those that impose the Cordon Sanitaire, they don't have fresh ideas. Now, knowing how well established they are with their think tanks, organizations, activists, media, how do we work on proposing our solutions and our ideas on the, we can also look on the European level, but I think this kind of power play between the nation-based problems to be solved, but then in the bigger picture.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that, yeah, they might have entire, as I called it, NGO industrial complex supporting the establishment parties and establishment ideas, but you can tell that they're exhausted. Just go to one of their events in Brussels compared to ours here, right? So I'm not one of these people who thinks that right, in Europe, what we've got to do is just look at Trump and do everything that Trump does, and we're all going to be okay because things are different here. But one thing that you learned from the election of Donald Trump was that it relied on not just having a charismatic or funny or buffoonish leader, however you like to look at him, but it relied on the fact that around Trump, there'd been built up an entire movement, an entire network of alternative media outlets, of people daring to think differently, even I was speaking to some academics recently who were researching the kind of right-wing thinkers in America, and that even though they're all left-wing people, they concede that all of the kind of intellectual energy and interest is with right-wing thinkers in America. And so we have a big job to do here to build up something similar. We try and make a bit of a start of it with MCC Brussels, but it's just the beginning. We need those, whether it's podcasts or whether it's completely whole new magazines or and people daring to think differently and committing themselves to coming up with some fresh ideas and some fresh challenges. But it comes ultimately from people confronting reality, and it's less and less possible for people to ignore the huge challenges that we face and the fact that the centrist position, the dominant position, has not got answers to it. People can see that, and people want something different.
Thank you. Elizabeth, while you were speaking, I was thinking about how people are starting to vote in bigger numbers for the parties that have been cordoned off for a very long time. And my impression is that quite often is that some of the citizens feel so desperate with none of the problems being solved and the challenge is only growing bigger, that they are eager to try. So they are like sometimes first-time voters. And I was thinking that they would like to know more about what is really going in the European Parliament. And for me, being very concerned about terror and the threat of radicalization in Europe, Islamization, especially when you look at it as a woman, I was wondering how proactively you could expose these moments where this cordon sanitaire stops very good ideas, very good motions to be put into discussion and into action by the well-established parties and the elites.
Yes, you're right. It's what our work. We have to be present in our nations, in our daily life. As you told, they try to don't let us participate in discussions. We have to go on. We have to, as you said before, we have to organize our own events. We have to be present. I think social media is very interesting. It's something new, but I'm convinced that speaking to the people, I don't know, in a pub, in a normal situation, is the best way to convince them, because they have pictures. All the media's made pictures about us. We are like not
Cartoonish.
normal people. So sometimes I don't even say who I am and which party I'm from. And so I start a conversation, and then they always come, what are you doing? Where are you working? Which party are you from? And then it's, you were a normal person. Oh, you are a woman? And then you can get in contact to them. And sometimes, as I hear in Austria, so they don't listen anymore to the television, what they are saying. We have the alternative media, so it's very important to talk to them. And we are here, we are the persons, we have to resist, we have to be present.
Thank you. Tom, you were talking about the media market, and that really struck me, and I think that links with Elizabeth's response. So since the cordon sanitaire was started here, do you see the development of the independent media here in Belgium? Has it been successful, or do you think there are certain things that could be improved from your perspective?
Well, the media market in Flanders is quite small, because it's a population of 6.3 million inhabitants. We have the advantage that we have our Dutch friends, which speak the same language. It's something like the Germans and the Austrians, I think. So we have a lot of crossover between the Dutch media and the Flemish media on topics which are of common interest. For example, in the COVID question was exactly the same way debated in the same language. So it gave us a way of being able to voice ourselves on public television. But then in Holland, you get to see more Vlaams Belang people on the Dutch public television than on the Flemish public television. But I think in the end, the system is so fragile because they are afraid of other voices. This is what at the heart of it. And this is not a sustainable situation. What is happening now with the Trump administration, it has already been mentioned. Well, basically, the European Union is closing its eyes for the reality that the United States is going in exactly the opposite direction on freedom of speech, on Green Deal, on migration, and on transgender ideology, and so on. So on numerous other topics. And they cannot continue to deny the reality that the most powerful country in the world is doing exactly the opposite.
Great. So now, is the audience ready to ask questions, add comments? There are two mics. There's Richard and Philip there. So please don't be shy. So there is a gentleman here in the middle. There is a gentleman at the back in the blue suit. Philip, yeah. Okay, and I will take a few questions at the time, and then I come back to the panel and let them choose the questions they want to answer. Okay. Yes. Yes, please. Yeah.
Hello. Really interesting conversation. I'm kind of new here in Brussels. Started to work recently, and to see that this is happening in Brussels gives me hope that there is another speech that's not kind of like those official voices. I have a question to the Flemish MEP. I wanted to ask you if you're aware that there is currently a cordon sanitaire in Catalonia. I'm from Barcelona myself. And there is a party called Vox, which is, by the way, in Patriots, which is being Cordon Sanitaire by Junts, and Junts has been supported by Flams Blanc and Catalan Independence as well. And Junts is, by the way, the most establishment right party that you can imagine. So it's kind of like the EPP, so I want to know if there is a selective cordon sanitaire that some parties can accept or not. Because as a Catalan myself, I was not supporting the independence of Catalonia. I am more familiar to the politics of Vox. So these different views inside of Patriots, is that a problem inside of Patriots that some parties are cordon sanitaire and at the same time there are speeches like today that we are arguing, okay, the cordon sanitaire is bad, we need to go out of this, but yet you support parties that are cordon sanitaire, parties that are in your same political group. So that is my question.
Thank you. And the gentleman there, please.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Arno Bausemer. I'm MEP from Germany, from the ESN group. And I'd like to congratulate you to the choose of the topic, because I'm from Germany. And today, as Elizabeth said already, the Cordon Sanitaire, or in Deutsch Brandmauer, is fallen today. It was so close, that election, that vote, that it's clearly based on our votes from my friends from the AfD in the German Bundestag, that it was decisive to get this. And when you take a look on the text of the amendment, it just says you cannot go when you go on the German when you cross the German border, you have to get, or you have to have, valid documents. It's something clearly, it's in any other nations clearly. Now it is in Germany, and it's thanks of us. And it's very sad that all the old parties did so long to get that idea that it's democracy when you take votes from a parliament, no matter from whom you get those votes. And there are still parties. I'm from the near of Magdeburg, a city that you maybe never heard before, but you heard in December, where 6 people died, a 9-year-old boy, hundreds of people were hurt, and there are still people in the German Social Democratic Party and the Greens and the left who just have tears, who are not real, because they don't understand that there must be a change in asylum politics. And I think now we are, from today on, a step further, and maybe the election in 4 weeks, that will help that Germany get clear and stable and patriotic again. And thank you for your work of the MCC.
Thank you. Here, Bill, please.
Yeah, I'm Bill Derodi. I'm a visiting professor here at MCC in Brussels. Many of us may have taken heart when we heard Donald Trump's inauguration speech. There were many aspects of it. One of them saying that there are only 2 genders in the United States may give people hope. But I just want to remind you how Hollywood responded to that. Hollywood responded by nominating a man for the Best Female Actor Oscar. And so I think it's easy maybe to begin to see some holes in the cordon sanitaire at the level of politics, national politics, regional politics, but we need to be reminded that this is a whole cultural, academic network which hasn't got as many holes in it as we may like to imagine. We're all here because we're interested in politics, but turning the enormous cultural and academic edifice around is going to take some hard work, as I think Jacob pointed to.
Thank you. Richard?
Yes, hello. I'm Germán Terch. I'm a member of the Parliament for Vox, for the Spanish delegation in Patriots. Good evening. Congratulations as well. And I wanted to talk about the historical moment we had this afternoon in the Bundestag. I mean, what has happened has been very, very telling about the situation in whole Europe. The CDU was forced to copy the AfD in a proposal, in a law proposal. But for distancing itself, it has filled this proposal with insults to the AfD. Even so, the only party which voted with the CDU was the AfD. And they said they did it because of the main point was to be patriotic, and the main priority was the nation and the security of the nation. The speech today of Alice Weidel is, I think, a turning point, and they are really, in this moment, they are in absolute panic in Germany, the left and the CDU, where we have Merz completely, let's say, stumbling. I think it's a very important move for this, to see that this Brandmauer, that this Cordon Sanitaire is breaking apart in a question of it's going day by day, week by week. It's going to be weaker, and it's untenable for everybody in Europe. So I think it will be very soon a thing of the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one more, Philip. There is a lady at the front, and then we come back to the panel, okay?
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for your really interesting insights. My name is Rada Lajkova. I'm an MEP from the ESN group. And my idea of Cordon Sanitaire is that it's even more dangerous for us, opposition in the media, than politically, because as we can see, politically, it's hard for center-right parties to ignore our ideas. And my question is to Ms. Dieringer and to Mr. Van den Drische. How is this developing in your respective countries? Because the media is a very good indicator to where is public opinion going. So do you have more opportunities to really have a discussion? Because for us in Bulgaria, when we bring the really strategic topics, for example, they try to force us to adopt the euro right now, the journalist just turns into a debater, and we really don't have any possibility to bring out our points. So how has this been changing in recent times in the media? Thank you.
Great, thank you. So first, Jacob, would you like to comment on the kind of academic cultural complex?
Hopefully, as I mentioned, I made it clear that that's one of the big jobs we've got to do, is to dismantle this whole complex. Because it's part of a much broader system. And I mean, we've seen there was the famous recent example that's been exposed of the EU paying NGOs and lobby groups to lobby itself. One of our colleagues is working on a paper at the moment about simply how much money the EU spends funding, fostering so kind of pro-EU narratives. So there's a huge job for us to do there. I'd like to briefly reflect on the situation in Germany, if I can, because obviously we've been following this closely, and thanks especially to my colleagues who have been following this very closely for us. But because the German example like encapsulates the whole kind of trajectory of the Cordon Sanitaire in many ways. Because firstly, lots of people have said that the power of those central parties in Germany was so strong that they could always enforce a Cordon Sanitaire or the firewall, but they've not been able to. And also, it's really illustrative, I think, of the two key things that I think are important about the Cordon Sanitaire. One, and apologies to some of my other friends and colleagues who are more sympathetic to the CDU than I am, but one, it shows that these central right parties can't be trusted, and you can't, as we say in the UK, you can't trust them as far as you can throw them. That you have to hold their feet to the fire on every single issue and force them to see sense, and that's what's happening with Merz, and we'll see how this plays out for the rest of the week. But I don't exactly kind of hold out much hope for Merz being this transformative figure that's suddenly going to force a reckoning with migration in Germany. But the second thing that's really important about it is the degree to which it shows the kind of whole ideology that sustained it is broken down. And in different countries, this takes different forms. But in Germany, it was really instructive that they just had a debate or a session on Holocaust Memorial Day just before the vote on this. And speaker after speaker stood up to say, we can't ever vote for this proposition precisely because the whole memory of the Holocaust is that's what we have to defend, and keeping the AfD out or refusing to have any questions about migration, that's an intrinsic part of the Holocaust memorial. And these lines that maybe made some sense to some massive people some time ago they no longer work. They don't have the same kind of resonance that they do, and so that whole ideological edifice is beginning to crumble down. And they're kind of last desperate attempts to say that, yeah, you call into question the memory of the Holocaust if you dare to say that maybe we should have sensible controls on immigration. This just appears to people kind of increasingly laughable, and so that's why I think the situation in Germany is so important for us to watch. But as I say, I think it illustrates these two really important things I've tried to talk about.
Elizabeth, would you like to reply to the question on media and strategies?
Yes, that what we have to do is sometimes to not only to react, but to act. And my party started doing what I guess every party in the Patriots has to do, that we have to create our own community to become stronger and stronger. And this is one part of the strategy. But I think the other one is, because you said 7 minutes, I would like to talk about the language that we use. It's the terms we use. When I think about my own words, so in my language, or I also speak Italian, or now I'm speaking in English, we adopt a lot of the new words. So we should be aware of the words that we are using. And until July of the last year, I worked in a school and as a teacher. And it's not the truth that the young people are not interested in politics. We have only to talk to them. We have to listen. So not only the media, but it's also where we can say something. It's when we have groups in the schools, in the kindergarten, wherever, or also that we support the culture topic. There are so many groups that we have to support. They don't have the money that they can do what the left cultural society can do. And so there are a lot of things that we can do step by step. It's not easy. It's hard work. But when a television or a reporter calls you, you have to go there. Sometimes my colleagues also say, no, I don't go there because I don't want to talk. They always have the same questions. They don't let us speak. No, go there and talk to them and show that we are different, that we have our ideas, that they. So otherwise, if you don't go there, you don't have the public. So one of the answers. And then we also have the journalists who talk to us and they don't try to cover every word or say only a phrase or something like this. So talk to them and be proud of what we are representing.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to pick up on any points, comments, questions?
Yes, there was a question about Catalonia, if I'm correct. Well, basically, this is an internal affair in Spanish or Catalonian politics. So this is point number one. Point number two is for the Vlaams Belang Party, we adhere, and I think everybody here in this room, to international law of the right to self-determination by peoples. So these are two points which I present to you. Now, if there's a Cordon Sanitaire in Catalonia against Vox by Junts per Catalunya, I think they're called, I don't think that neither Vox nor Junts needs a Cordon Sanitaire not to cooperate together. So I think this is a whole other debate here. But this is yet again, if a party, by definition, does not want to cooperate with another party, it's their right to do so. It's not illegitimate or anti-democratic to make this choice. It's imposing it on everyone in your organization and on other parties. This is what is anti-democratic. We have seen, for example, with the last local elections, people being expelled from the Christian Democratic Party because they made a good coalition agreement with the Vlaams Belang Party, for example. They listened to their voters, they made an agreement, and yet they got expelled. This is what is anti-democratic about the Cordon Sanitaire. And I think overall, internal affairs in Spain are not top priority in the Vlaams Belang Party. I think it's a top priority for the Spanish people. So I think this basically sums it up a little bit.
Thank you. Right, audience. Okay, I see Tony, then I see a lady here. Philip, there's a lady here in the middle. Yes.
Thanks very much. It's probably a question for all three of you in different ways. Why the Cordon Sanitaire cannot hold? I didn't discuss this with Jacob in the office, but well, actually, if you think about the difference between Europe and America, that's a point you made in your speech, Jacob, that Europe is nations, separate nations, for all that the EU's control over it. And so when I listen to Mr. Tersch's point, which is a very good point, Mr. Tersch, but what I'm hearing is something that's almost like occurring in the European Parliament. It's like, how can we defeat the EPP? How can we hold the EPP's feet to the fire? How can we get them to be more sensible? And meanwhile, we know that young people, in the way that Elizabeth was talking about, was really important to both the American election, but also in the recent European elections. There was more young people voting for the parties behind that are being kept out on the so-called far right than anticipated. But I look in this room, and it's brilliant to have so many people here. There's not many young people in this room, yeah? And so our ability to connect with young people, the opportunity to get those ideas out there, and it's the point that you made, Tom, about people, it's the ideas that they're afraid of. But actually, young people have heard really bad ideas for a long time. They know there's something up with them, right? But how often are they hearing some convincing other ideas, and how often are they getting involved in deeply, properly engaging in those debates and discussions and talking about it freely? So I guess my point is that one, Europe's different, and two, there's a danger of complacency. There's a real danger of thinking the job's done. Final illustration of this, I'm organising a conference for MCC Brussels on populism in a few months' time, and I wanted to try and find some podcasters in Europe who could come on and talk about their interest in populism, etc. Very, very hard to find. I got so desperate, I even asked ChatGPT, and it said there's not really too many of them around. So I tried to be more precise, and I said, well, what about podcasters who are into nationalism, podcasters who are into conservatism, populism, blah, blah, blah. And it came back and it said, I must send this to Sarah Wheaton, actually. It got a lovely little image. It said, yeah, not many of them around. Try, number one, MCC Brussels. Number two, Politico, which shows you the limits of ChatGPT.
Thank you, Tony. The lady?
Yes, hi. Marianne, I am...
Can you stand up, please, for the camera as well?
Nice to meet you, everyone. I am one of the journalists at Politico. Thank you for organizing this debate. Just on your point on making sure the EPP pays for having imposed a Cordon Sanitaire for so long, while at the same time making sure it doesn't hold. Are you seeing pockets of opportunity to work with the center-right on some of the topics that you're pushing forward, like repealing parts of the Green Deal? And are you collaborating with them on their inquiry into this question of commission funding towards NGOs, for example? Like, have you found opportunities to collaborate with them on the topics that you care about? Thanks.
Thank you. Gentleman in the front, on my right, please.
Yes, thank you for organizing. It's great. John Wubber, Flemish Club, Arts, Science and Industry and Literature. Yes, last week we were at the World Economic Forum. Yes, we were, to look out. And what do we see? No, not that many NGOs anymore. And due to the fact that they were all talking about the impact of the AI and the impact of course, the Trump legislation. And Trump actually changed in one beat, he changed everything. At the same time, in the Netherlands, you saw that there was a change to the right. However, it's still not going forward. So my question to the panel is, when the Cordon Sanitaire would actually fall due to you get your voters to vote for you, are you going to change the whole, let's say, other-minded administration working in the governments and all the departments like Trump did in the United States within 24 hours? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There was a gentleman also on the right, more in the middle there, closer to the wall. Yeah. And then I will take one more questions and then we come back, okay? Because I think these were really interesting questions.
Hello, yes. Thank you for your organizing of this. Just for Frau Dieringer, what she was saying with education is important, as somebody who is at a university. When you talk with people under 30, they often have had little or no real education, you know, in the, what do they know about history? And this ignorance is what drives this ideology, which is crumbling, but with ignorance, well, that doesn't help us. The second thing is, what are your opinions on demographics? There was a controversy in Germany last week of a SPD politician who was talking about we'll stay in power thanks to demographics due to immigration. And just the last, so voting blocks due to ethnicity or religion. And the last thing with just a comment, we shouldn't forget that things have definitions, even though we're ignorant. So fascism in Italy was the armed takeover of the state by a private army, but the term was popularized by Stalin for his opponents. So even Trotsky was a fascist. So we're in good company, I suppose, but the point is, as Mathieu Bocoté said in France, that everybody who is to the right of Jean-Luc Mélenchon is of the extreme right wing. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is a lady at the back. Philip, might be easy to go around, probably. Well, Philip can do it. Thank you, by the way.
Hello. Do you think that the countries with a majority vote are bound to to have the populist party to be more aggressive and to get finally the absolute majority, and that's the only way to get rid of the Cordon Sanitaire?
Thank you. Right, so this time I think I let you choose the questions. Which ones would you like to pick up and where? And I will start with Elizabeth, if that's possible.
Okay, I was thinking a lot about which one I would pick up first. So changing the system. So that's what the others always did, and it's not the best practice example that I would choose. And it's in Austria, if we talk about now we are talking about the government, and so the ministers, and also there's a lot to do. You can't change it in a minute. It's not like, I suppose, like doing it in America. We have contracts, we have another system in Europe. We are completely different from this point of view. And but there is something that we have to think about it. I don't know what it's in the other parties, but it's not so easy to find the persons who would like to work for us. But this is also kind of Brandschutz, whatever it means. If somebody works for us, it's like having a symbol like Once Upon a Time in his curriculum vitae. So it's not easy. We should try to work on this, that we convince people that they come and work for us, that they can see what we can do. But I'm very honest now, it's not easy to find young persons also to come. I'm still looking for people who would like to come to Brussels or would like to go work for us. But changing, it can't be like this if we are in the government now in Austria. So it's the first question I'll take, but we can change it by the program we offer. We have now, because when you see the proposals that we have there, the left and the Greens and the others are just crying, no, what will they do with the television? And so we don't do anything. We only say what are our visions for the future, and just this alarm system is now everywhere. But I think with the program we have to change something. That doesn't mean to change every person. They have to work for us then.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Would you like to address any of the questions? Maybe the ones from Politico or different ones?
I'm not sure which one that was, but no, I've written down some remarks because there was talk about, I think Anthony was speaking, what's the use of these kind of platforms? Well, there are not many young people attending, or there could be more. Well, I think the participation of young people in politics is somewhat more fluid than attending gatherings like these. Social media has always been mentioned, but what is most important, that it is a concept of conformity pressure. There was this experiment I had at university in social psychology, and it, how shall I say, it's like when a statement is presented by a person which clearly has authority, for example, in uniform or seeming like a doctor, and it's a statement that everybody knows that is just not right. For example, the Earth is flat, and when they test it, and there's no counter speech, 80% of the students agree with what has been said. When there's one people standing up, the conformity goes down to 20%. And I think this is exactly what we are doing here. We might not be with a lot of people, but what our most important thing we do is that we continue to speak out, because we are talking about reality and the truth, and they are talking about not the reality but their fantasy. And this is what we are seeing now with the Trump administration. It goes the other way. Europe goes the other way, and they are thinking that with the Draghi report, which will be implemented, in my opinion, that they can subsidize a Green Deal business model which simply does not work on the global markets. And what they are doing by that is that they are buying time. They are thinking that by buying time they can postpone their downfall. But their downfall will come either politically here in Parliament by breaking the Cordon Sanitaire, or by the voter in the ballot box, which is keeping on voting for right-wing parties, and we are coming to power. Maybe Austria is the next one, Czech Republic is following, and so on and so on. So as a general remark, I think the people who are now in power, they seem to be powerful, but they are not. They are simply not. It's like what Taleb described with his book. They're not anti-fragile. They're fragile. They're not robust. So just keep on pushing, keeping the message out. Do it in a normalized way, in a decent way. We do not need to be provocative all of the time. So I think truth is on our side, and victory will also be on our side, because they are the last of yesterday and we are the first of tomorrow. Now, there was a question on the cooperation with EPP, I think was by the miss from Politico. Now, the Patriots group is always open for cooperation. We are an example of cooperation. We have so many parties from different countries coming together within our group. And of course we have differences, which has also been questioned by the question earlier. Of course there are differences. But what binds us is much more important than what separates us. And I'm firmly convinced that what Mitterrand said, that le nationalisme c'est la guerre, nationalism is war, I think it's quite the opposite. It's liberalism that is war, because this is exactly what we are seeing. The liberals are pushing for war in Ukraine, to continue the war in Ukraine. The liberals are in a war against their own citizens. For the Digital Services Act has always also been mentioned, is an example of how scared they are for citizens using their civil rights to voice their opinion and maybe to topple the government in democratic elections. So you see, the truth is on our side. We must not be scared to voice it. We must be courageous, and I think we are.
Thank you.
To say also some words about working with other group. So it's my first mandate here, and I was in the regional parliament in my so it's a completely different way how you talk here, or you can talk to another party. So it's not easy, and we are always there are a lot of people who don't even say hello to us when we are. It's that they don't talk to us. So as you said, we are here, we would like to discuss, we would like to talk, but it's not always, it's the other way around. They don't talk to us, and that's maybe their problem and not ours, but also ours, because we can't go on. But I think that when you listen to the discussions in the parliament, it's, we have questions, we talk, and I just had 2 blue cards in the last time, and they don't even say a question. They only are accusing. So I don't answer them in that way. So that's what they are doing, and I'm waiting for the questions. I'm waiting for the collaboration, and so that's why not the most important.
Jacob.
There was just a quick one. I want to mention about The need to have 50% of the vote, also a question, majority. I don't think this is necessary. Austria is demonstrating that. But in the end, when coming to power, the most important question is, what are you doing with that power? If it is to enter into government and to do the same thing that all of these old parties from the Liberal and the Socialists did, well, then I'm happy to be in the opposition and not being into power. We are there to promote the interests of our people, and this is less migration, more purchasing power. This is just the common sense policies re-entering into politics.
Mm-hmm. Jacob?
I guess just to pick up a couple of things. One on the question, not an elected member, but my take on the whole EP thing is that politics is a little bit like sport insofar as like momentum is a tangible factor. And for so long in European politics, it was clear that doing deals with the EPP meant giving more power to the EPP. It meant that parties got sucked into the orbit of these centre-right parties, that they became kind of more and more dependent on that stifling force that is the EPP. And now something's changed. The momentum has kind of changed. And so the guiding principle I would adopt if I was in Parliament was you work with the EPP where you can weaken them, where what you do puts our agenda forward and takes the wind out of the sail from the EPP. And if we can throw that momentum forward, that seems to be the guiding thing. Tying up a few questions, but the question about like actually how to win and gain and exercise power is really, really important. And every country will have slightly different civil service makeups and all the rest of it. But the first thing has got to be that you've got to have some courage, I think. And you've got to say that we might have to rip up some old established ways of doing things because the kind of size of the challenge that we face is so great. And we have to be prepared sometimes to enact slightly a sweeping legislation. Because as I tried to point out in my speech, we're up against not just a series of policies, we're up against an entire machinery that's demonstrated by the cultural, NGO, industrial complex, that's demonstrated by the stranglehold these people have over our institutions. And so what's required is actually kind of something quite radical. And that's why I don't have one warning, I guess, to some of us kind of patriotic or populist parties, that we can't just let as important as it can't just be about migration, because that's just one policy, right? And we have to win the debate on that and win the argument on that and change the way this works. But there's a danger that if we just allow it to be about one single issue, that ultimately the forces, whatever we call them, that kind of nebulous thing that's represented by the EPP, that they'll concede enough on that to take the wind out of our sails. And we've got to be honest with ourselves and saying that there's actually an enormous kind of machinery, a whole system that has to be confronted. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves in power but unable to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jacob. Very good points. Frank?
Right, speaking as a young person, right? I still remember when all the language that's used to support the Cordon Sanitaire did not exist. I think one of the things that we often forget is that the people that control our language control the way we think and ultimately control our political behavior. And one of the things that I worry about is that when I see the debate and the discussion going on, the language that is used to support the Cordon Sanitaire is very rarely challenged. So take, for example, one of the excuses for the Cordon Sanitaire is that what you're doing is you're controlling hate. In my lifetime, hate has mutated from an emotion, which is a normal emotion. I think we all hate certain things, nothing really wrong with that, into this standalone ideological concepts that somehow there are groups that are hateful, and there is a speech that they can call hate speech. And even people on our side very often use hate speech. They say, oh, I don't hate, or they say, this is not hate speech, forgetting the fact that the minute you kind of adopt the grammar and the language of their particular outlook, we kind of lost the battle. And it seems to me that when we look at the political vocabulary today, we have a very big job to do. Because, first of all, there are labels that are used routinely. I mean, these days, anybody, any single person that has got strong views about sovereignty becomes ipso facto hard right. anybody who believes in borders becomes automatically an extremist. And if you look at the way that the language has mutated, I remember there's a time when words like authoritarian, fascism, and all these words were used very, very sparingly. They were only used to apply to a certain number of individuals. Today they are used so promiscuously that we no longer know who is what and what isn't. And therefore it seems to me that the key thing to defeat the Cordon Sanitaire, but ultimately to triumph, is to fight the culture wars effectively. It's the one area that we do not have any chance of controlling in the short term. It's the one area that's going to create a lot of problems even for Trump, because Trump can sign all kinds of decrees about all kinds of different things, but it's going to have no consequences in a number of places, because there are very powerful cultural and media institutions and legal institutions that will thwart that. And it seems to me that at the moment here in Europe, we're being very often a little bit naive in not understanding that this is a battle that we got to address much more centrally, much more forcefully. Ultimately, and this is a challenge to the MEPs here and other places, we need to create a dynamic intelligentsia that can support the kind of movements and parties that exist in the Patriot group. We desperately need to have more think tanks, more smart people promoting ideas than we have at the moment. We really desperately need to be able to match. What we really basically need is what I call Gramsci in reverse, where we basically reverse the existing cultural hegemony with our own ideas. And what I would like to see the Patriot group doing is paying a lot more attention to that, and not just remaining on the level of rhetoric, but actually digging deep and playing a key role in throwing up new ideas that can successfully contain and defeat the language police and the cultural elites that are going to make life very, very difficult for us.
Thank you, Frank. Because we're slowly running out of time, I think I will just come back to the panel if you would like to give your last remarks. And then I think keep your questions. Okay, Lisette. Okay, Lisette, short question, please. Wait for the microphone, please. And then I will come back to the panel and...
Hi, my name is...
microphone closer.
Hello. Yes, my name is Lisette Munslag, and my question is for him. Tom van den Driessen. Boo. I had a discussion. In my opinion, the Cordon Sanitaire against Vlaams Belang is unconstitutional. I had a discussion about that on Facebook, and somebody sends me to the Constitutional Court. But we don't have a law. It's not a law. It's an agreement that political parties made to exclude Vlaams Belang. But in my opinion, my legal mind, you can still challenge it legally because it goes against the gelijkheidsbeginsel in the Belgian constitution. I'm not a lawyer, but I think it can be done if you have the courage to challenge it.
Thank you.
Philip de Winter knows me. I'm going to talk to you.
Right, so let's come back to the panel, and if you just give your final remarks, you can pick up any of the things were discussed earlier or respond to Frank. And we obviously will continue the conversation later with drinks and some nibbles. So Elizabeth.
I totally agree with Frank, and we just talked about it in our first meeting. And yes, you are right, we have to focus on maybe not only, let's call it publicity for ourselves, but what is for the future important, and to create also other kinds of platforms and stay together and talk about this loud and clearly. What are our ideas, where we want to go, and I would like to invite all of you also to stay here together if you want to know something then, because I think it's the time that there are a lot of things to say, but I'm thinking also loudly and silent about a lot of things. And thank you very much once again also for the beginning. I had a nice conversation just in the beginning, and it's encouraged me to go on and to be proud to be, as I said, sometimes right because we are right. Without that, what we say, and it's not something bad. So I think it's my position, it's my life, and I want to change something, and so I'm right to do this.
Thank
you.
Tom?
I will try to be brief. Eh? No, I think just the political system is on the verge of collapse, and it is coming down country by country, and it is being brought down by the voters in democratic elections. So this is just my conclusion of all of this. And we're not here to save a system that is corrupt. We are fighting basically a uniparty from the old center-left and the center-right parties. What exactly is the difference between these parties? Nationalism is a force of the future, the force of cooperation and the force of peace. And I will leave it there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jacob.
No, so, I mean, maybe you're all just aging very well, but I do see plenty of younger faces here, and maybe Tony just saw the back of your heads. But and there's not anyone in school uniform here. But the thing kind of that all this points to is that, and this is also to your point about how can you find people to work with, which is that people go where the kind of center of energy is, where the center of intellectual gravity is, where exciting, dynamic and kind of persuading things are going on. And that's the argument ultimately that we have to win, the kind of ideological one, the question of the really political question, what have we got to offer people? Where's the networks that we can get people into? Where's the kind of a cultural scene that we can get people into? And we know that as much as our elites would like to try and provide a kind of fake version of this, like say Kamala Harris did with their campaign, right? You can't actually fake like real substantive, like for lack of a better phrase, vibes. You can't fake real interesting stuff where dynamic intellectual work is happening. And our job is very much to do that. That's what we like to see ourselves doing at MCC Brussels. And I mean, we have our podcast. We'd like to invite more of you guys here in the audience on at some point, but you should all watch it. You should put us in touch with people you know in your respective countries that are doing interesting work in this area, because that challenge that we all have this kind of pan-European beast to contend with, but we're all still rooted in our nation states. That's a really crucial one, and so we need to spend that time working with each other, hearing from each other, kind of learning from each other and sharing ideas and challenging each other, like good debates that would happen here and elsewhere, because we have this, as I say, there's a huge machinery that's represented by the current setup of the European Union. We have to smash that. And we're not going to be able to smash it unless we find some element of common cause. And then that allows us to go back and also win the argument in our home country. So that's what we try and do at MCC Brussels. We invite you to join us, keep coming. But yeah, that's our job, and we want you to be part of it.
Now let's thank our guests. And before I let you go, please remember to follow us on all the social media, press all the notification buttons. We have lots of events coming up in February, so if you didn't subscribe to our newsletter, this is your homework. The first event is next week on Tuesday, and then at the end of February, two more, middle and end of February. So please do follow us on social media, subscribe, share with friends, and not only friends. And please enjoy the rest of the evening and continue the conversation. Thank you.